Well, new developments nearly a week before the start of a trial that is expected to be one of the most watched this year. The murder of 17-year-old Trayvon Martin. The unarmed teen was shot and killed while walking home in Florida last February. The man who did it is claiming self-defense. This week, we got a better idea of what the jury will hear once they are selected. It begins on June 10th. The judge buzzing through a series of pretrial motions, and some of what happened in court is not sitting well with the attorney for the Martin family. That attorney is Benjamin Crump. He's my guest now. Mr. Crump, great to see you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, Megyn.
So for the most part, you won your motions. I mean, the prosecution won in its attempts to stop Mr. O'Mara from introducing all sorts of character evidence, what he would, I guess, say was character evidence about Trayvon Martin. And the judge said that none of that stuff is relevant now about Trayvon's alleged drug use, pot smoking, some discipline problems in school, and some alleged history of fighting. But she didn't close the door altogether. She said that O'Mara can introduce it if it becomes relevant. O'Mara came on the broadcast earlier this week and said it will be relevant if the prosecution tries to argue that George Zimmerman initiated this confrontation. Well, that's exactly what the prosecution is going to argue, right?
Absolutely. And I think for very clear reference to what the judge said was that it was inadmissible, it was irrelevant, it was not exculpatory in any way, it did nothing to prove or disprove George Zimmerman's guilt or innocence, and she wanted to make sure that only relevant information came to this jury. And I think that's important, Megyn, because there's a lot of things to try to confuse a jury. We want them just focused on what happened that night.
Do you think this is going to be an attempted character assassination by the defense attorney, Mark O'Mara, of Trayvon Martin?
I do. I think it's old strategy. It's nothing new. Try to vilify the victim to justify the acts of the defendant. And in this matter, I think it is out of the old playbook. They waited till after the jury summons had went out to release this information so it could influence and confuse the jury pool.
So you think when they're coming on TV and releasing these pictures of, they were from Trayvon's cell phone. I mean, you know, he's a 17-year-old kid. He's got photos on there of a marijuana pod. He's got a photo of a hand holding a gun. That was done to influence the potential jurors in this case.
Well, I think it absolutely was done to do that. And they put out information saying it was from his cell phone. That's not entirely true. Some of it was from social media images, Facebook page, Twitter page, and we don't know what context it was taken from, if it had been manipulated or not from Facebook, but they just put it all out there, we believe, to try to influence the jury. And God help us all if any teenager who smoked marijuana before was given a death sentence.
Mm-hmm. Do you think, I mean, what this case comes down to, they don't even really need to talk about Trayvon Martin's character. They can offer their defense, their full-throated defense, by saying this comes down to what was in George Zimmerman's mind and what he believed and whether he thought that he was in a dangerous situation or in an attack-type situation, without getting into who Trayvon Martin really was or what he stood for and so on. They can do that. So why go, you know, down this other road of trying to demonize a 17-year-old who's been killed, and could that come back to alienate the jury and backfire against them?
I think they have to be very concerned, Megyn, and we have to remember that night of February 26, 2012, George Zimmerman had no idea who Trayvon Martin was, walking home with his hoodie on in the rain. And it really begs the question when you think about it. This neighborhood watch volunteer packing a gun on prescription medication is really every parent's worst nightmare when you think about it, because God help you if your teenage child is walking through the neighborhood and he decides that your teenager is suspicious and they don't answer the question of George Zimmerman when he says, "What are you doing around here?" and they mouthed off, then God help your teenager that he's not shot and killed.
But they are going to try to portray George Zimmerman as a man who is scared in his neighborhood, and Trayvon Martin as somebody who was quick to get in George Zimmerman's face. And one of the things O'Mara, the defense attorney, seems ready to try to introduce, if, you know, given the window, is he claims he's got videos of Trayvon Martin filming fights, not Trayvon in the fights, but filming fights that his friends were having, including, allegedly, one of his friends beating up a homeless guy, I guess to try to show the jury that there was a callousness there, that there was a familiarity with fighting, that he was okay with fighting. This is my supposition of where he's going.
Like the judge said, you can't authenticate that. You don't know what context that's in. And I think it's misinformation. You put enough misinformation out there and say, this is what it is, then you influence a jury pool. We doubt very seriously there's any such information like that out there. It's all innuendo and suggestion. Can't be proven. Unfortunately, Trayvon Martin is dead and can't tell you his side of the story, what happened. But all those videos and things, we've seen them, and they're not Trayvon Martin in any of those videos. And so we think just because they put information out there does not mean that it's evidence, and that's very important to note. What is important is that evidence that we hear from the 911 operator, the objective evidence that you and I can hear with our own ears, the things we can see with our own eyes, that's objective. And I think that the state of Florida, as well as the defense lawyers, should focus on the objective evidence, and I believe the jury can make the decision for themselves.
Yeah.
We've only asked that it be a fair process to both the victim's family and the defendant, and if that's the case, everybody can live with it.
Well, you won most of the motions. I mean, the prosecution, which is, sort of your side, won most of the motions. I do want to ask you this. We've heard nothing out of the defense to suggest that they want a plea. I mean, I think O'Mara is going for a straight acquittal, either from the judge based on immunity or from the jury, if he can do that, or from the jury based on self-defense. Does Trayvon's family have any interest in a plea deal if the defense were so inclined?
Well, unfortunately, they don't have any power over anything like that. They want full justice. They believe their unarmed child was killed unjustly and that the killer should be held accountable. And the rules of evidence won last week, not the prosecution, not us, not the defense. The rules of evidence that have been well established based on jurisprudence that you can't bring irrelevant stuff into a courtroom. And we don't want this case to be anything different from any other case out there, that we apply the rules of evidence. It's very transparent, it's very fair since everybody's watching. So we know that the rule of law in America is the great beacon that all the world can see that it's equal and just for everybody.
Absolutely. Benjamin Crump, thank you so much for being here, sir.
Thank you, Megyn.
All the best. What are we, 11 days now from the start of that trial. Jury selection begins on June 10th, and so we shall see what happens in those proceedings.